Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I'd like to invite us all to do something a little bit different from our usual. I'd like to invite you to stand up if you're willing and able. And I'd like to invite you to place your palms together with me. I'd like for us to begin with just a deep breath together. I'd like us to clasp our hands together like this, and then push forward gently, and then bring it up above the head, stretch up gently, and just be careful of your neighbor as you come down gracefully, touching each other with love if you have to. And then clasp behind the back and gently pull back. And then release and come back to the head. Let's do that again, breathing in at the heart, clasping, pushing forward as we breathe out. Breathing in as we go up. Breathing out as we come down behind the back. Breathing in, clasping back. And breathing out, coming to center. Breathing in, clasping, pushing, breathing out. Breathing in, breathing out. Breathing in, breathing out. One more time. Repeating after me this affirmation and prayer. May we and all beings be happy and free.
May we and all beings be happy and free.
May we and all beings transform our suffering.
May we and all beings transform our suffering.
May we and all beings rejoice in all joys.
May we and all beings rejoice in all joys.
May we and all beings be at peace.
May we and all beings be at peace.
Awakening to the truth of who we are.
Awakening to the truth of who we are.
Infinite light.
Infinite light.
Infinite love.
Infinite love.
Infinite life.
Infinite life.
Taking a deep breath together. Namaste.
Namaste.
Well, this morning, during the first service, I was feeling a little nervous, as I always feel a little nervous before I have to say anything in front of any amount of people. You know, I started off as an introvert, and I had to learn how to be extroverted for public speaking. So I may come across as very casual and easygoing, but inside I'm scared. Which is why I realized this morning that actually, looking around the room, I had a lot of friends here. You know, including Cornell Kindercadet on the flute and Gary Floyd on the piano. And earlier this morning, Tracy Brown was doing the spiritual invocation, and all the other friends here at the Center for Spiritual Living. I realized I'm just with friends. And so there's nothing really to be nervous about. I'm just a friend among friends. So I'm just sharing from that place in my heart. So I do want to say thank you to Gary and Cornell. You know, they remind me of how interconnected everything is in our lives. And I remember when I was a teenager at a Southern Baptist youth camp, Gary Floyd was the musician for that camp. And then, of course, Cornell, who I met a few years ago, who plays flute at our meditation every Sunday. And I'm just very grateful for them. So nice to know that there are so many people in my life who are all part, and you never know. I met, for example, Gary like when I was a teenager, and then years later, lo and behold, we do songs together. In fact, Gary's going to be performing with the band a song, One Heart, which we co-wrote together during the announcement slides. So I'm just really happy to be here today. Another really wonderful interweaving of my life with this community is several years ago when I moved away from California and Minnesota and moved back to Dallas, Texas. I wasn't sure what churches or communities to be a part of. So I was checking out different ones, and I encountered an email from one church, and for some reason they had a quote by Marianne Williamson, which was kind of unusual for that church, but they had that quote. I said, oh, cool, Marianne Williamson. So then I went to the Barnes & Noble bookstore, and I saw Marianne Williamson's face on the Science of Mind magazine there. And so I thought, oh, well, then I should check out the Center for Spiritual Learning. Back then, I think it was called Church of Religious Science or something like that. Anyway, so I came here, and they give out things to the visitors. Well, that Sunday, one of the things they gave out was like some free old copies of some of the Science of Mind magazines. And the one I got was with my Buddhist teacher, Thich Nhat Hanh, on the front cover. So I knew I was in the right place. And another very recent synchronicity that occurred for me was I was invited by the Sikh community a couple weeks ago to share a few words to represent the Buddhist community in solidarity with them while they're going through the tragedy and suffering of what happened in Wisconsin. So the local community here had 800 people coming for the candlelight vigil. Well, I was in Seattle on vacation with my family, and I decided after meditating on it, I received these inner nudges that yes, I should fly back one day early, leave my vacation one day early and come back and be a part of that candlelight vigil. And so when I was there, though, because of the time, there were so many other people from other religions wanting to share words. Unfortunately, the Christian one went way, way over his time. So poor Buddhist didn't get to say anything. Well, I had two thoughts. One was Buddha-like, and one was ego. In that moment, my ego was like, what? I flew all the way back here one day early. I left my vacation one day early just to be here, and here you cut me off. It's like all the other religions got to speak about the Buddhists. That was just for a few seconds, and then Buddha's voice came through again. No, you were just here to be in solidarity with the community, and that's all. And your presence is your message. So okay. But I still was trying to meditate on it the next 2 days, because when I receive inner nudges that are very strong, they're usually pretty accurate for me now. Now, way back when, before I was very deep in meditation, I couldn't tell the difference between an inner divine nudge and a random thought or ego thought. I couldn't tell the difference. But now it's a little easier for me to tell the difference after over 12 years of meditation practice. So I was curious, well, I really felt I received the signs to come back a day early, so what happened? Was there something that went wrong? When I meditated, I realized there were actually two other things that happened, at least, that wouldn't have happened if I hadn't come back a day early. This is why I try not to practice complaining too much, even though sometimes I do, like we all do. But but when I'm late for something, if something's wrong with my car or whatever, I try not to complain anymore, because I don't know the ripple effect of what's going on. You might be late for something, but you might be also avoiding a car accident. You just never know what's happening. So just be glad that you're in the flow of the universe, and the universe is in the flow of taking care of things. It doesn't need your commentary. So I realized two things. One, there was a water leak in the kitchen that was growing bigger and bigger and bigger. Because I came back a day early, it prevented it from flooding the entire house. and having thousands and thousands of dollars of damage to my family's house. You know, and that was very important to my family. It wasn't the most important thing to me, but it was very important to my family. The second one, which was the more important thing personally for me, was because I came back a day early, I had to sit by totally different people on the plane. And the man I sat next to on the plane was a gentleman who was 48 years old, going through midlife. His wife left him for another man. He had to deal with child custody issues. And he was also unsure of what the meaning of his entire life was from birth until that point. This felt meaningless to him. And he was searching, and he was looking for spiritual answers. And he had the opportunity, and I had the opportunity to share with him all of that I had to share about meditation, mindfulness, yoga, spiritual practice. And he was really eager. And he was really ready to hear it. And so he asked me to write down websites and recommended books, and we've been keeping in touch by email. And I'm looking forward to just being a spiritual friend to him. But I realized that wouldn't have happened if I hadn't gone back a day early. So you just never know. You know, one of the things we're going to talk about is letting go. Letting go, letting be, letting flow. And one of the things we have to let go is our preconceived ideas of how the universe should run. Because that prevents us from actually enjoying each moment as it is, which may be actually perfect. And we're not able to enjoy the perfection of the world because we're so full of the commentary in our head that we're not able just to be with life as it is. Now, that gentleman wasn't going to get away, actually, because he was sitting in between both a Buddhist minister and a psychotherapist. So he wasn't going to get away, but he was making sure. And I realized because the universe is impartial, that the kind of care the universe shows for that man is the exact same care the universe, the divine, shows for me and for you and for everyone. So it's just a wonderful truth. Now, while I was in Seattle, I picked up a book for some summer reading, and I also brought a couple of other books, too, to share with you. Of course, I have to share a book by my teacher, Thich Nhat Hanh. And if you don't know how to spell it, you can read up right here. I don't know if you can see it. Thich Nhat Hanh. And that's how you pronounce it. All right? This was one of the first books I read by him, Touching Peace, but there's also Being Peace, Peace is Every Step, etc., etc. He's written over 80 books. So basically the universe is making sure people get a book. To have 80 copies of books. So a wonderful book by my teacher, Thich Nhat Hanh. And if I have time, maybe I'll share a few books from there. Another wonderful book by another spiritual author who's also a Buddhist is a book by Jack Kornfield. He's pretty well known, and he's a very good writer and a very good meditation teacher. I highly recommend that you read any of his books, but his latest book, which I think is his best, is Bringing Home the Dharma, Awakening Right Where You Are. Bringing Home the Dharma. And the word Dharma, for those who don't know, that means the truth, the principles of the universe, the law. You call it the law in science of mind. So, bringing home those principles here and now, right where you are. Now, and then last but not least, I love, these are nice spiritual books, but if you just want some fun reading, this is called Lessons from the Monk I Married. I love that. Catherine Jenkins, she's a local author in Seattle. She went over to South Korea to teach English, and she wanted to also learn meditation, and she really felt this resonance with this one particular Korean monk, Buddhist celibate monk. And they hung out a lot and had tea together and had conversations and meditated quite frequently together. Well, of course, eventually they fell in love with each other, and he eventually left being a celibate monk and moved to Seattle with her, and he started a yoga center there. Man, I just love this love story. It's so juicy. It's better than Eat, Pray, Love. So anyway. All right, so I want to talk today about these three phrases: let go, let be, let flow. And there's a mantra that I use many times with these three. I am home. And this is one of the mantras that came to me during my meditations. it's nice to use other mantras that you receive or that you find very helpful, and that's good. But eventually, if you practice enough, you will actually receive your own within your own heart. And some of the ones that I frequently use that have been very helpful to me are I am home, thy will be done, which is from Jesus, and all is well. These have been very powerful for me, and they're jam-packed. And the nice thing about a mantra is that even though it may be a short phrase or a few syllables, it's packed with many, many deep layers of meanings. And it gets unpacked only by practicing meditation with that mantra. So I found some very deep meanings in the mantra, I am home. And so for me, I am home means, first of all, to let go of stress, to let go of the things that hinder us in our spiritual and life practice. So in this sense, I am home would mean I am becoming home in the here and now. I am getting at home in my own body and mind. I am feeling at home in the present moment. I'm coming to a place of acceptance. I'm coming to a place of peace with what is. And this would be one of the three kinds of spiritual practices. Just stress reduction. A lot of people come to my meditation center in Richardson. The main reason why they're coming, it's not necessarily for enlightenment, it's not necessarily even for manifestation, it's primarily for stress reduction. Just getting some peace of mind to cope, right, with the stresses of modern life. Well, I'm going to be talking about from the perspective of meditation today, but really, all three of these spiritual practices of letting go, letting be, letting flow, can be done through a variety of spiritual and spiritual modalities. Another modality that you can work with also is psychotherapy, 12-step recovery, all kinds of different ways to just help kind of relieve the stress, come back to center, be present, right? And these are all wonderful things. I think I'll share a little bit from this book here by Thich Nhat Hanh. It's a wonderful story, and it kind of illustrates the point of letting go, especially of misconceptions about reality. I'd like to share a story about suchness. There was a patient in the mental hospital in Bien Hoa who seemed to be normal, and this is somewhere in Vietnam. He ate and talked like other people, but he believed that he was a kernel of corn, and every time he saw chicken, he ran for his life. He did not know his suchness. When the nurse reported this to the doctor told him, "Sir, you are not a kernel of corn, you are a human being. You have hair, eyes, a nose, and arms." He gave a kind of sermon like that, and finally asked, "Now, sir, can you tell me what you are?" The man replied, "Doctor, I am a human being. I am not a kernel of corn." The doctor was happy. He felt he had helped his patient a lot, but to be certain, he asked the man to repeat the sentence, "I am a human being. I am not a kernel of corn," 400 times a day, and to write it on a piece of paper 300 more times each day. The man became devoted to doing it, and he stopped going out at all. He just stayed in his room, repeating and writing exactly what the doctor had prescribed. A month later, the doctor came to see him, and the nurse reported, "He is doing very well. He stays inside and practices the exercises you gave him very diligently." The doctor asked, "Sir, how are things?" "Very well, thank you, doctor." "Can you tell me what you are?" "Oh, yes, doctor. I am a human being. I am not a kernel of corn." The doctor was delighted. He said, "We will release you in a few days. Please come with me to my office." But while doctor, nurse, and patient were walking together to the office, a chicken walked by. I guess this is Vietnam, but anyway. A chicken walked by, and the man ran away so quickly that the doctor could not catch him. It was more than an hour later that the nurse brought him back to the office. The doctor was very agitated. "You said you are a human being and not a kernel of corn. So why did you run away when you saw chicken?" The man said, "Well, of course I know that I'm a human being and not a kernel of corn, but how can I be sure the chicken knows?" I love that story because it just illustrates how sometimes our ideas are a little bit distorted. And because of that distortion, the Buddha, who was a beautiful spiritual teacher among many other spiritual teachers in history, he gave us some really wonderful practices and tools to work with to help us to clear away the distortions in our mind, because the distortions cause us to see things in many, many misperceived ways, which then cause suffering. And the Buddha's basic bottom line was, let's transform suffering. That was his bottom line. Other spiritual teachers have other kinds of bottom lines, but that was the Buddha's bottom line. Let's transform suffering. And so when people would ask the Buddha different questions about metaphysics or the cosmos or cosmological questions, how old is the universe, and all of these different kinds of questions, the Buddha would just be silent. And he wouldn't even answer those kinds of questions. And it wasn't necessarily because he didn't know them, because I believe that he had such a great full enlightenment. He knew a whole lot more than the average person. But he knew as a human being, as a divine expression in human form, he only had 80 years of life or so. He had a limited amount of years to share the teachings, and he did not want to waste a single moment or a single breath on anything other than what was going to help people with their bottom line, to transform suffering. So he would only answer questions that related to that fundamental question. Someone earlier this morning was saying, thank you for my message about what I shared, and it was like, she was so happy that she doesn't have to learn everything to understand spiritual practice and meditation and mindfulness. You don't need to know everything about quantum physics or quantum mechanics, right? It's like this. I don't need to know what's inside a car in every detail to know how to drive it, okay? So you don't necessarily need to know all the details of the laws of the universe to transform suffering, You just need to know the fundamental basics and practice it. That's what you need, to go to the depth of the bottom line of the truth for you, and then practice it. That's all you need. The rest is just details. So, some of the things that we have misconceptions about that we need to just practice letting go of are impermanence and non-self, or interbeing is a better way of putting it, about suffering and about the nature of peace. Now, I'm not going to go into the metaphysics of this. I just want to look at these from 4 practical points of view. Basically, use these teachings of the Buddha for your practice, not to analyze it analytically or anything like that, but to practice it. Okay, so when you're meditating, and there's different kinds of meditations. There's some kinds of meditations that are for stress reduction, some kinds of meditations for enlightenment, and some kinds of meditations for manifestation. And that actually corresponds to letting go, letting be, and letting flow. Okay? So when you say the word meditation, it has a lot of different meanings. Okay? It doesn't necessarily mean the same thing in every context. But when you are meditating for contemplation and insight, because there's mindfulness meditation, concentration meditation, insight meditation, loving kindness meditation, etc. But for insight meditation, you want to focus on these 4 questions. You want to look at deeply impermanence. Really study in your mind impermanence. And start with something as simple as the breath. Breathing in and breathing out, feeling the impermanence and the ever-changingness of the moment as you focus on your breath. And then you can expand that further to the impermanence of the body. And expand that further, impermanence of thoughts and beliefs and ideas. The impermanence and the ever-changingness of the relationships you have. And the impermanence of the entire universe. So you begin to start seeing the truth of impermanence, and then it makes it so much easier to let go of things. Why are you holding on to things that by nature are not meant to be just permanent or solid, but they have a dance, a flow? So don't stifle life by grasping and confining with your ideas how things should be. Let go and flow, because life isn't static. Life isn't permanent and fixed. and closed. It's not a closed system, it's an open system. So if you want to stop causing yourself more suffering, start being in harmony with the way the universe actually is and flow with that. By letting go, it's so much easier. So, also, another contemplation is non-self. Now, this has many deep meanings. I'm not going to go into the deepest meanings, but I'll give you the simplest meaning, which is to translate non-self to mean interbeing. In other words, that yourself is not just a static, solid entity that is fixed and never changing and never part of anything else. You're never a separate self. You're always an inter-self. Your beingness is always interconnected and interrelated to everything. And that's why when you meditate on the breath, you start realizing, what I think of myself as self, it's not just this part of this body, it's not just that. Because there's also this breath. Because without this breath, I couldn't be alive. And then you start seeing the breath isn't just in this body. The breath is being breathed by all of these people in this room, and all the green vegetation of the planet is giving me oxygen, so they're also part of myself. And the vegetation is nourished by the sunshine and the rain and the minerals and the earth and the place of the moon in exact relationship to the earth and the rotation around the sun, giving the possibility of life right as it is right now. That also is myself. And you keep meditating and expanding, and you start realizing who you really are, which is not who you thought you were. This is another meaning of non-self. Doesn't mean you don't exist. You see, people get it all messed up sometimes when they think Buddhists are nihilistic. Well, some of them are, but but I think the true Buddhists know that emptiness actually means fullness, not non-existence. So, letting go, and I'm already touching on letting be, but realizing and awakening to who you really are. Now, I gave you the two contemplations on impermanence and non-self, and the other two are just about those two. The contemplation on suffering. Contemplate how much suffering you cause yourself when you resist the truth of impermanence and interbeing. And then contemplate how much peace you find when you are in harmony with the truth of the flowingness of life, which is called impermanence, and the interconnectedness of life, which is what we call non-self, or interbeing. When you meditate deeply in that, it's so much easier to let go of the stuff that causes suffering and to embrace and celebrate that which causes peace in life. Wow, I'm almost out of time. Okay. So, I guess I'll skip one story and go to another story. I guess this will be my last story. So, when we practice here the manifestation aspects of our spiritual practice, which is a wonderful thing, and we emphasize it very much at New Thought churches and communities. And I think it's very important because, honestly, when I look at some of the traditional Buddhist communities that I'm a part of, sometimes they're so good at stress reduction and enlightenment. Well, sometimes they're not so good at stress reduction, but most of them are very good at enlightenment, awakening to who you really are. But they don't know how to manifest that well. So you got all these, starving Buddhist meditators who don't know what to do with their life. They're so impractical. And that's not good. Because to me, honestly, what they have to offer is so important. It's worth being abundant enough to share it instead of always worrying about what they're going to eat and where they're going to live from week to week. So I don't believe in that kind of poverty consciousness. And I don't know how it happened in Buddhism that it got to that place where so many people think that way. Because honestly, a lot of new monks now are starting to research the original teachings of the Buddha, and they're discovering things that they weren't taught before. And one monk wrote a book on the Buddha's teachings on prosperity. Who knew that the Buddha had any teachings on prosperity? But he did. But they were not talked about for many centuries. And now they're being rediscovered and taught again. The Buddha was totally about prosperity consciousness. Why? Because what we have to share is so important to the world and what the world needs for peace. It has to be abundantly shared. And you can't abundantly share it if you're always worrying about your own lack. You can't do that. So, but on the other side, if you try to manifest without having done your work in internal psychological work as well as enlightenment work, you can still manifest, but it's not as deep and powerful as it could be. If you can manifest from a deep, healed self and an enlightened self, then your manifestation self is so much more powerful, and it flows from a deeper core intention, more than just ego intention. It comes from divine intention flowing through you. And so, my last point then is, do your spiritual practices. And by the way, I hope everyone got a chance to get this sheet of the 12 spiritual practices. My website's on there, awakeningheart.org, or you can also go to dallasmeditationcenter.com. On the back is a calendar. But the main thing is I want you to take these 12 spiritual practices and start practicing all of them simultaneously for several days at a time. 21 days minimum, or 40 days and 40 nights, whatever. Buddhist, 108 days. But anyway, practice them diligently and see your life transform. But what I want to share with you in my last point is, not only can you manifest from a thought in consciousness or an intention in consciousness, you can also manifest from a state of consciousness. And that's what I mean by letting go or letting be and letting flow from the place of being. So allowing the doing and the creating and the flowing to come from being. See, this is one of the things that Eckhart Tolle teaches in The Power of Now and A New Earth. And I really love his way of sharing the Dharma, or the principles of truth. Because he says it in words that can communicate to anyone, not just to Buddhists or whatever, but to everyone. And I love that. And I was talking to one of my Buddhist teachers after I had my own experience of a glimpse of awakening. Now, I'm not going to call it the awakening, because I believe there's many glimpses of awakening that you can have before they have the awakening. But I had a genuine glimpse of awakening that was confirmed by my Zen teacher. And in that experience, I knew that I'm not confined to body and even mind. That who I really am is just pure awareness, pure being. And that this true self cannot die. It doesn't make mistakes. And so for several days and weeks after that experience, I had no fear of death, no fear of making mistakes. I was in bliss. And during that time, I just manifested left and right. I didn't even have to think that much about anything. It just would manifest. Because I was no longer just manifesting from a thought in consciousness or an intention in consciousness. I was manifesting from a state of consciousness. And my state was in complete harmony with my true being, my true self. And so one of the things that happened was I went to a monastery in California during that time, and I was driving one of my Buddhist teachers to the airport, and we had a conversation about Oprah and Eckhart Tolle is doing this new series on A New Earth, and it was so great, And I said, I've met all these other spiritual teachers, Byron Katie, Adyashanti, Marianne Williamson, etc., etc., etc. I don't know why, I just happen to bump into them all the time. I don't know, it's weird. But the one person that I really love, and I haven't met him yet, is Eckhart Tolle. So I said, I would love to meet him. I'd love to give him a hug and just say thank you to him for all the good work he's done. And so when I dropped her off at the airport, I had this thought that just popped into my consciousness. I should stay for a few more minutes. Maybe someone else is flying in and needs to go get a ride to the monastery. And I'm wearing all brown, so you can't miss me. So I waited, and no one came, and I didn't see anybody else in brown or anything, so I said, okay, well, I guess I'll just go back. Right before I went back, I looked over to luggage claim number 2. And there was this man with his back to me. And I was so drawn to his energy. And I kept looking closer, and I looked sort of at the profile, side profile. I thought, that sure does look like Eckhart Tolle. I never met him before, but you see his pictures on YouTube and the back covers of books, etc. So I kind of took the food over, and I just like, yeah, that really does look like it. So I like took a deep breath, and I just bravely walked up to him and I said, "Sir, I'm so sorry to bother you, but may I ask you, are you Eckhart Tolle?" And he turned around and looked at me and said, "Yes." So I gave him a big hug, and I said thank you to him. And I gave him one of my Buddhist mala beads of 108 beads, and I gave it to him as a gift. And I also got a chance to talk with his wife, Kim Ing, who is Chinese also and has the same last name as me. And so, when I told him what happened, she laughed and she said, "Boy, you sure manifested that quickly." But it was effortless. Because that's what happens. So keep doing your spiritual practices. Put effort into it. But there will come a point, or many points, when you are just in that state of consciousness and not just trying to affirm that state of consciousness. You are that state of consciousness. And from that state of consciousness, watch out, world. You are the manifestation of the divine. So let go of all that obstructs that truth. Be that truth and let it flow from your heart. Namaste.